All right, everyone, it's time for my sort of official reaction to the State of the Union. But first, I've actually got to go to my Twitter profile here because I conducted a little informal poll last night on what people thought would be his grade for the first State of the Union address. So over 3,000 people voted. Basically, it was A for excellent, B for good, C for just okay, or D or lower for, subpar, he failed at the State of Union. 69% voted in favor of it being excellent. This is actually a little bit higher than I would have expected. Between excellent and good, it's 91%. Not 91% of the people on my page here are actually Trump fans. There are also people who are on the left, both for trolling reasons and criticism. That's actually an indicator to me that the disproportionate number that I'm seeing there is actually evidence that it was indeed objectively a fairly good speech. Probably the average American would rate it as a B, a good speech. Of course, my audience is tilted in Trump's favor, generally speaking, but not 9-1. So I keep that in mind. So that's the first thing we have to say. This is a pretty good poll result altogether. My own reaction is that it was very good, somewhere between an A and a B. It hit all the marks that it needed to, with a couple of exceptions, mainly that affect his core fans, especially on the Israel topic. You may have seen, of course, Trump took a jab at a significant number of countries in his speech with regards to that one issue. He's like, Israel is our friend. We move the capital. We officially recognize it as Jerusalem, not Tel Aviv. And Israel's like, gung-ho for that, because basically it's saying, hey, Jerusalem, and if there's a partition, we're backing Israel's claim to the whole city. I don't, by the way, approve of that. I think it should be split down the middle and be a peace city of some sort. And there should be there should be a bunch of statues in the middle saying, we're gonna have like the little Jewish kids and little Islamic kids like do hand painting on the lampposts and stuff. You should have something like that, like what they would do with the Berlin Wall. It's like, just fucking get along. Haven't you killed enough of each other already for long enough? It's like, it's never enough. People don't want peace because peace doesn't sell as much as war does. It's a problem. But Trump's like, a bunch of countries condemned us for that. Well, so we've sent like tens of billions of dollars to some of these countries. Maybe we should prioritize our friends, basically threatening them, saying, hey, back the fuck off. The United States has the right to recognize the capital. Others, by the way, there are other countries that have followed suit. I think Uganda was the first one. Some crazy country, that most people couldn't find on a map is like the next one. It's sort of like our first treaty of friendship being with Morocco. It's just one of those funny asides within our history. But it was funny, think what I may about Jerusalem being the capital of any state. It was amusing. He's like, well, maybe we should stop sending the money, basically. Although, you gotta understand, this is a little bit sly on Trump's part because he's already suggested cutting off the spigot of most of that aid anyway. He's probably talking about nations like Pakistan, which I think we gave them, $2.1 billion plus certain military aid in excess of that, and of course they condemned us for moving it there. That is true, by the way. If the United States, if we, the American people, determine that a policy isn't a good idea, that's one thing. But for another nation to condemn the move, when it's simple diplomacy, it has nothing to do with, hey, we're marching in and evicting the Palestinians personally. I don't see why they would really have a problem with it. I can see why there'd be like an intifada situation on the West Bank, but I can't understand why Pakistan, not even being in the Middle East, really give a fuck, to tell the truth. They're like, oh no, this will cause rabble-rousing. Well, who cares? It's your problem. We send you all sorts of military aid. Use that on the rebels. Just have fun. We do it all the time, for better or for worse. I'm highly caffeinated this morning, you can probably tell. And the State of the Union was, mildly exciting. A little bit more boring than it could have been. I was hoping that he would be less presidential. I was hoping that he would come up there and hold up the FISA memo and say, aha, here's the memo. Just cast copies out into the crowd and be like, okay, well, it's public now. As president, I can do that. Oddly enough, by the way, he can legally do that with classified reports. He can say, no, it's not classified anymore. Give it to people, unredacted, if you want it. And he'll probably allow it to be public, by the way. That is a prediction I'd be willing to make. I don't think he blocks it. It got too much airplay. The idea of releasing it's too popular for him to block it from being released, probably despite what others would say. He cares more about the political side of it, I think, than the fallout potentially from it. But you got to realize some other things about the State of the Union. One thing that I felt he fell slightly short on was actually one of the most important things of the night, which was immigration. Not because he was saying anything that I personally have a big problem with, but you got to understand a lot of his core fans are further out, more puritanical when it comes to the idea of amnesty versus deportation. When Trump said, "Oh, I'm willing to create a path to citizenship for, X number of dreamers," I think he said 1.8 million, which is still, it's like, isn't that like a quarter or a third of the total? So he's claiming he's going to deport the average dreamer. He's saying if I get my wall, the Democrats can get some of these dreamers. There are exceptions. No more chain migration, no more visa lottery. By the way, major issue. Those are victories for him in this State of the Union with his core fans. The Democrats tried to boo him and shut up really quickly when they realized that even a lot of the Democrats weren't joining in the catcalls. That's because it looks remarkably similar to what Bill Clinton or Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton prior to the last election used to say about immigration. Oh yeah, build a wall, chain migration's a problem. They would use the term anchor babies, stuff like that. These are all problems. No, they all said it openly back then, 90s and 2000s. Now they act like they themselves were racist, I guess, 10 years ago. So by their own standards, they were literally Hitler at the time. It's rather funny to see that. He attacked the NFL as well, but I thought the thing he fell short on was probably conglomerating his core fans around his immigration message. I would say if you get the wall, an end to the visa lottery, an end to chain migration, and you deport 3 times more dreamers than are not being deported, that's a fairly populistic, nativistic platform. That's what I would consider to be good. Because I would myself grant leniency to someone who came here as a child. I'm failing to see what the big difference is between if someone comes here when they're like 2 or 3 and they barely speak, they can barely jog around, they really don't have any understanding. They're brought here at that age versus being born on our soil where they would have automatic birthright citizenship. I'm not seeing a huge difference between them. The latter person has been here basically their whole life. They know the lingo, they've studied here, they're planning to have a future here, and yet they're in this weird immigration state. I'm not sure that should be prioritized for deportation. But then there are people who were not children when they came here. They came here illegally and they just happened to be to get into some form of employ, or they studied here. And the fact that they happen to be smart or brave enough to join the military is in itself the only thing the nation has to care about at this point with regards to immigration. It's noble. I think that they should have maybe an expedited slot for legal immigration in the future. That's lenient too. But to simply say, okay, we're giving you amnesty, despite the fact that you came here illegally in the first place, I'm not sure that strikes the right tone. I'm sorry. And I think the Democrats' proposal that everyone who's part of DACA should be legalized, it fits right in with their plan to make them all Democratic voters, part of their released memo. Now, I think that the average person rejects that idea. I think that most people would agree with Trump and be more even-handed. And then there's also a minority, the population, that's like, no, don't legalize anyone, everyone gets deported. Hell, we're going to deport citizens too, and that comes with problems. There are also people who don't want Trump to negotiate at all. They expect him to get the wall, sanctuary city crackdown, no more chain migration, no more visa lottery, another wall and 10 turrets. They expect him to get everything and not have to legalize anyone. Not the way that government works. Even if he invokes the nuclear option and gets the Supreme Court in on his side, it would still take years to accomplish that. And in the end, he wouldn't get reelected because it would have dragged out so long his core fans would quickly lose interest. It'd be too burdensome. It wouldn't work. Good luck getting everyone to cooperate. But you've got to also understand, dreamers are a small subset of the illegal immigrant community anyway. So when you're talking about, 2/3 or 3/4 of them being deported anyway, or at least, temporarily, what does that say about immigration overall? He's taking a hardline nativistic stance in favor of the American native over people that are, foreign born on that token. Unless they're legal immigrants. If they're a lawful resident or something, that's a different story. They're doing it the legal way according to what Congress has laid forth as the immigration proposals. But I don't think that he coalesced all of his core fans with that one. He took a swipe at the NFL sort of anthem thing. That was funny. It's very funny because, of course, the Super Bowl is, I believe, in a couple of days or something. It's, first week of February. So that's going to weigh heavily on them. It's going to be funny to see probably Kid Rock come out or make a speech beforehand. Don't you fucking kneel for the anthem. You stand up and put your hand over your heart. That'll be funny. Overall, though, I think the best part of the speech was Americans are dreamers too. That particular line resonates with people, I think. That particular line is the big takeaway that I had, because when I heard it, I immediately fixed on it. It takes more to excite me about something that's said by ultimately an older, politician than the average person. Most people are maybe more gullible and they're just sort of tuning out, watching the boob tube. I have to sit there and more actively analyze it in order to be able to make a video like this as part of my job description. But that particular line does stand out. That was a powerful line. That's a way to really, really defeat the Democrats' argument, which is that they're saying, oh, well, these dreamers are such wonderful people. They just want to go to school, join the military. They want to be Americans. Trump is pointing out, and again, he's congealing this into one very short, half-sentence term. Americans are dreamers too, He's taking that and saying, well, yeah, but Americans want to get an education. Americans want to get a job. Americans want to be in America. And right now, they're not able to do that because of our shitty immigration policy. You have many of the people that he had up on the balcony that he could point to and say, oh, well, here's, person X, and he's known for this. This is this firefighter. He saved a bunch of orphans. His cop, his partner, got shot in the head by an illegal. A lot of it was immigrant related, honestly. The Democrats did not manage to put up a wall of defense against that. They don't have a defense against Americans or dreamers too, because it is a true statement. It rings true. It may be empty, but it does work as a motto. He could use that as a slogan. He could use that as a sub-slogan in the 2020 election. The Republicans would be wise to trot that term out in certain districts in 2018 here with the upcoming midterms. It'd be funny to see what the result would be. Ultimately, though, I think Trump's State of the Union, it was a success in multiple ways. Honestly, with the economy, that was like the big thing, because he's like, well, the stock market's up, and the job reports are better, and wages have begun to rise, unemployment ticks down over and over, there's money everywhere, people are going to get more wealthy, tax reform we've passed, people are going to have more money to take home, they can invest in small businesses, we've dropped the business tax rate, we can compete with anyone now. That's all really, really important. That's the sum of what he's going to run on. Immigration falls slightly short, takes a few jabs at some enemies, does it well, has a good motto. Ultimately, that's a successful State of the Union. Additionally, while I would have liked it if he had waved his hands around and started throwing FISA memo copies into the crowd, he managed to restrain himself from doing that, like he probably does want to do at some point. Just like he wants to walk off Air Force One and take a whole bundle of papers and start spreading them to the media. Report on this, you cad. That would be great. But he restrained himself from that, because another thing is he still cast it off as non-presidential, especially with foreign policy. And you'll note, in closing here, the one thing you didn't hear much about was foreign policy. That's because that's his Achilles heel at this point. With the DPRK still not technically contained, Venezuela still having problems, and of course the looming Russia nonsense, which is a non-scandal, but it's in the public consciousness. He can't yet take credit for being a good foreign policy president. I think it falls into place on its own in the wake of the Mueller probe ending, which I expect it will soon, at some point, probably before the midterms. Venezuela might collapse on its own, or it might recover. Either way, Trump can take credit for it in a roundabout way. And on the DPRK, there's no present existential threat to the U.S. at the very least. But right now, Trump can't do the foreign policy chops thing. He has to do economy, and he has to do, hey, literally, in the sense of a slogan, we're making America great again. Because of the economy and our reforms, immigrant-related and everything, things are coming together. We're getting things accomplished. The other thing is that his opponents are trying to cast him off as a do-nothing, already lame duck president. It doesn't matter if he accomplishes everything that he wants to do in his first fucking 2 years, but it does matter that he's accomplished some things. With the early and often fumble of the ACA, that was a big problem for the Republican Party. They'd be a lot stronger right now if they had ignored the ACA and said, we're getting rid of the mandate, but we have other things we've got to do. They should have made their case for tax reform early. Before any of the fallout from the ACA happened, they should have said, we're going to work on that first. It's more important to get jobs going inject the economy with some stimulation here. Ultimately, the ACA can wait. We're ending the mandate, so you won't have to pay that 2% penalty, but we've got to put that on the back burner. We encourage the states in the meantime to figure out what they can do to ameliorate it in our absence. He should have done that. Unfortunately, the McConnells, and you notice that McConnell almost never stood up and applauded any more than Nancy Pelosi was during the speech. There's a reason for that. Mitch McConnell and others stood in his way. And they're still doing so. Yeah, when you see some of those top-ranking Republicans sitting there with not a happy look on their face, looking at their own party controlling the House, the Senate, and the White House, the president speaking, saying everything they were saying maybe 4 years ago, and getting it accomplished, and they're still not happy, there's a fucking reason for that. Trump has probably taken Mitch McConnell out behind the woodshed a couple of times over the ACA. He's like, how could you be such a fuck-up? Meanwhile, he's partying with Rand. Rand does his typical golf clap thing, although dour-looking Rand, that's normal as well. The fact that the Democrats didn't get up and cheer was normal. That sort of thing, that's not even disrespect. Like, if this had been an Obama speech, the Republicans wouldn't largely be clapping. They would just sort of sit there. That's what happens. Overall, a good State of the Union, though. I think he did a fine job. With a little refinement, the next one could be even better, though. He needs to make sure, he needs to throw something to his core fans other than, hey, America's working again. Okay, that's very Reagan-esque. It's wonderful. You need a little bit more meat on those bones, I think, for the core fans. Buff them up before the midterm elections would be the best thing possible to do. Overall, though, it was better than Joe Kennedy's speech. Maybe less charismatic, less soaring, but the thing is, Joe Kennedy needed to pull an Obama out of his ass. He didn't manage to do that. He fell short of the mark. Likewise, a lot of the markers were pretty low. It was a pretty low bar for Trump because the media is like, oh, we're not even going to watch it. It's going to be a shit show. He's going to say terrible things about immigrants. He's horrible. He's Orange Hitler. When you've derided somebody consistently, making a decent speech looks really good by comparison to the expectation in a lot of people's minds, including the minds of some demoralized Trump fans. Also something that needs to be kept in mind. That's about all. Peace out.